All right, is that looking okay? Hopefully everyone can see that okay. And Tom or Jeff, let me know if you can't.
That's very clear.
So what is an energy efficient house? I think the starting point for this should be to say what it isn't. And it's definitely not energy efficiency isn't about saying just, suck it up and put another jumper on and keep your heaters off because you don't want to waste energy. It's actually about making your home more comfortable than it was when it was less energy efficient. It's about making a home basically comfortable in all seasons and low cost to run. So for Victoria, this means that it's good at keeping heat in winter so that you don't lose what you've generated, and keeping the heat out in summer. It should be comfortable a lot of the time without any active heating or cooling. And then when you do need active heating or cooling, so that's one that uses a fuel source, hopefully it should heat up or cool down quickly and then hold that temperature. And all of the appliances, all the major appliances, will be cost efficient to run. Why does it matter? Now, in the scorecard tool that I use, the average house, I think I'll be able to show you here, is a 3-star house. That's the average in Victoria. And that will cost, in the ballpark of $1,500 to $1,800, something like that, to run a year. And it's not uncommon for me to see houses that are 2-star or 1-star, which cost a lot more. In fact, a 1-star house is more like between $3,500 and $5,500 a year, which is a lot of money to be spending just on the major fixed appliances. Jeff touched on why our homes are like this. I think that because we've had a mild climate, we've been able to basically get away with not building very thermally efficient homes, and the building codes haven't really forced us to either. Historically, we've had really low energy prices, both gas and electricity, so we haven't really been bothered either by the idea of just, if we're cold, we just turn something on to fix that problem. And Australians, to my mind, also just don't really have a great understanding of energy and how it relates to our homes. And my personal theory is that it's partly because you can't see energy. So whereas you can see water, people have become really good at understanding when they're using water and making plans to use less of it. But energy, you can't see. You just turn things on and you use it. But who is to know what, if this item's using a whole lot or a little? You can't really see that. So I guess that's partly where my passion for this topic comes in, is just to try and help people understand their homes better so they work better for them. What's in it for our communities to become more energy efficient? Well, comfort is a massive one for me. Even if you don't end up using less energy, you can do things that will make you more comfortable without replacing anything, as in no appliances. Also cost, of course. An energy efficient home is going to cost you less to run. There are good government rebates for quite a lot of upgrades to more energy efficient appliances. So, that's just a little bonus to help us along the way. And an example I wanted to give from the other day, I did an upgrade scorecard on someone. I'd done an original scorecard assessment, and I think they had a 2.3-star house, and they'd done a whole lot of upgrades to the building shell, and they swapped over their plug-in electric heaters and put in 2 reverse cycle air conditioners. Their new star rating was 6.7, and they said they'd gone from paying $300 a month electricity and always being cold with those plug-in electric heaters to now paying $120 a month and always being warm with their 2 reverse cycle air conditioners. So it was a money saving, but also a major comfort change. We're more resilient when our homes are more energy efficient because they will keep their temperature better. In the recent big winds, a lot of people had blackouts. I know we did where I am. And we didn't have power for ages. So if you had a house that could just hang on to its temperature longer, you were going to be more comfortable than those that, lost it after 10 minutes. And of course, last but not least, reducing our contribution to climate change that Jeff also touched on. The less resources we use, the lighter our footprints, the less non-renewable resources, even lower. And that's why people are also making a change away from gas completely and to electric appliances and installing solar, because that means they're not using non-renewable resources or very little. And by making changes ourselves, we encourage other people to do it. The more people that make changes, like this guy that I mentioned who had the big savings and comfort difference, he's going to mention that to his friends, and then they're going to do it as well, and everyone's going to be better off. Okay, there are three main factors in energy efficiency at home. So the first is building shell thermal efficiency, and that's the way your house is constructed. It's basically the ability of your house to keep heat inside in winter and outside in summer. Of course, in other states, that'll be a different thing. You'll want different things, but for Victoria, that's what it is for us. Appliances. Appliance efficiency is how efficiently an appliance gives you the effect you want. So how efficiently will your heater give you heat? And an example of different efficiencies is that an open fireplace is about 5% efficient. If you burn wood, 95% of the heat goes up the chimney and you get 5% of the heat. Whereas a reverse cycle air conditioner that's new is going to be at least 300% efficient and more like 400 or 500% efficient. So that's a massive difference. User behaviour is the third of the three main factors, and it's how you use your home and your appliances. Even if your house is amazingly well designed and you have efficient appliances, you can use it in a really inefficient way. And when conversely, if you have a house that isn't that well designed and the appliances aren't that good, you can still use it in a more efficient way, than other. So how you use it is important. The types of energy assessment you can get, there are some that look just at the building shell, so just that first factor. Then there are others that look just at appliances. That's usually called an energy audit. So that's where you count every single energy using appliance in a house and work out which one's using what so that you can pinpoint possibilities for reducing energy. The type that I do, which is the scorecard, is a combination of both. And I think this is, to me, it's the most interesting one and useful one because it looks at a house as it is, an existing house, and the whole way it's built and the appliances and how they interact with each other. And it means that the person getting the advice or the assessment can really make plans as to what their best options are for making it more comfortable and more energy efficient. So before we begin, I wanted to show you this chart from Sustainability Victoria. It shows that heating is by far the largest cost of all the energy we use, and water heating is the next one. So that's why most of this presentation, it has a slant towards keeping heat inside and being energy efficient with heating. And that's just because it's such a major factor for us. We're going to look first at the building shell, then at appliances, and that third factor that I mentioned, the user behaviour, I'm going to put it in wherever I think it might be most appropriate. So let's start with the building shell. The building shell, or sometimes called the building envelope, is what separates our inside environment from the outside environment. And all of these factors that you can see listed up here play a part in how well your building shell works. When I'm assessing, usually I would also recommend things in this order. The ones at the top are often the simplest and easiest and cheapest to do, and will make the biggest impact. But it always depends on the house. So every house is different, and so sometimes you might shuffle them around a little bit. Zoning is the first thing that I always mention to people. A lot of older houses are already zoned well because that's how people used to make them. They didn't think about heating an entire house. They would always heat or cool a certain room. But and so more new houses are more likely to have big open plan spaces. But either way, whether your house is old or new, there are usually ways that you can incorporate some zones if you don't have any. The reason zoning matters is that one of the simplest ways to reduce your energy use is to heat and cool by zone rather than the whole house. The other thing is that regardless of using, a heater or cooler, just by zoning off areas of the house that might be, for example, drafty or might get a real bashing from the summer sun, like a west-facing room with west-facing windows. By zoning those off, the rest of the house is going to stay more comfortable, even before you put heating or cooling on. So here are some examples of how you can add zoning. This picture on the left was one I saw in a house, and I was so impressed. It separated a big sort of kitchen, dining, living area, and then there was a hall behind it that also had a stairwell going to a lower level. So by putting this simple curtain up across that hallway, they pretty much halved the amount of space that the heater was trying to heat. And it's so simple and yet so effective. The middle image of the Japanese curtain, they are lightweight, but it's incredible what a difference that can make, just separating one room off from another. This third image, the honeycomb blinds, this image is of honeycomb blinds on a window, but I think they would actually be excellent in some hallways as well, as a sort of a what do you call, a closable door, like one that slides to the side and closes. These images on the right are all devoted to basically double-storey houses. I think almost every double-storey house I've been in, unless there's some sort of closure at the bottom or the top, there's an issue with all their heat rising up. So the top rooms are always warm in winter, and it's hard to keep the bottom ones cool. And then in summer, the top rooms are really hot. So the ability to just close off so that the heat can't rise up is so important. And these are some fantastic ways people have come up with doing that. If you're renovating and you're wanting to open up rooms, knock down walls and open up rooms, my main advice is just by all means have an open plan area, but keep some sort of ability to make smaller zones. Temporary, permanent, doesn't matter. Just give yourself that choice of making a smaller zone if you want to. Draft proofing is the second thing that is always worth looking at. And even if you just do this one thing to your house, it is likely to make a big difference, especially if you're in an older house. It's often cheap to do, simple to do, and people are largely unaware, I think, of all of they can feel those drafts, but not necessarily are aware of where they're coming from. I do want to point out the difference between ventilation and a draft. So we do definitely need ventilation in our houses, and that's a really important part of being comfortable. But a draft is, you could say it's ventilation that is uncontrolled. And a lot of older houses have this uncontrolled ventilation built into them. And so what we want to do is seal those and have ways of ventilating the house that we can actually actively use. So windows that you can open and close, exhaust fans that you can turn on and off without it being a constant draft. Draft proofing saves energy in two ways. One is that by stopping drafts, you don't feel cold as quickly, so you're less likely to turn on the heater. And it also means that your house is literally losing less air, so the heater is not having to replace that heated air all the time. They do say that in the average Victorian home, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, if you add together all of the gaps and cracks, it's the equivalent of having a 1 metre square window open all the time. And none of us would want that, and yet our houses are frequently doing that. This chart is one of my favourites. It shows all of the different common drafts in a house and the comparative impact they have on, air loss and gain. You can see that the very largest one is a chimney, and it's surprising how many people have older houses that have open chimneys that aren't in use, but they're left because they look nice, and they do look nice. It's actually really simple to just put a chimney stop into that chimney, and that will stop you losing that huge amount of air that you can see on the chart. And there are some other things on this chart too that you might be surprised about. So one is evaporative cooler vents in the ceiling, ceiling and wall vents, and exhaust fans. These are things that you can't really see the draft necessarily. So often people aren't aware that they're there. But we're going to go through a bunch of drafts now and show you some pictures. So these are, I suppose, the beginning things that you'd look at in a house. One is external doors. This picture up the top is just showing a massive gap under an external door, which, as you can imagine, is letting heat in and out all the time. This one is an internal door, which usually it wouldn't matter for an internal door, but if it's an internal door to a room that has a large draft, for example, an open louver window in an old toilet, then you would also draft proof that door. Windows is another one which can, if they can technically be quite simple to fix if they're an awning window like this. If they're not, there's always other ways you can go about it. Sometimes with doors and windows, you do need to actually do an adjustment on them to make them close properly. These are some other drafts that are common in houses. We have, hang on, let me get my thing, a wall vent. And lots and lots of houses that I go to have wall vents still, and people rightfully think, well, they have been built into the house, so they must be needed, right? Well, actually, no, they were built in prior to, well, they were built in when we had unflued gas heaters and kerosene heaters and things like that that did need permanent ventilation to keep your air safe to breathe. But we don't need them now, and you'll notice any houses after 1990 or so just don't have wall vents. So those can be sealed up. Then we have this one up the top is just some gaps and cracks around the ceiling. This one, sorry, didn't mean to do that. This one is around the door jamb. That's a common place for drafts in the skirting boards. Here's some more drafts in skirting boards. And then the two pictures on the right show where there has been either plumbing or electrical work done, and the tradespeople have cut a hole and just not sealed it very well. And often they go straight into the wall space or under the floor. So they're well worth sealing up as well. Other drafts that you might not have noticed are in old skylights. So the top left picture, those ones are often vented at the top. And so there's constant air coming in and out. Unless there's a ceiling level layer, then they can be a very drafty thing, but you can do something about that too. This wall vent here, that is this picture, sorry, a ceiling vent. They predate exhaust fans and also are a hole straight into the ceiling. Then we've got the just floorboard cracks. The one on the right is what an unsealed exhaust fan looks like from inside the ceiling. You can see that it is literally just a hole cut into the plaster and letting air in and out all the time. Then below that, we have this hole. It's just a hole in the brickwork of a house. And these two at the bottom, the open louver window and the permanently vented toilet window, that's actually also quite common in a 60s or 70s house, and they can be sealed up too. Couple more. Downlights are sometimes a draft issue, the big ones and also the ones that have these gaps around the sides. There's the evaporative cooler vent, and also the heat lamps are another one. Oh, and the chimney. These are some of the products that can be used to seal up drafts. I will just mention a couple. This one here is a sun tuff that you can put into the bottom of a skylight shaft to pretty much trap air, but also stop drafts. This one here is a chimney sheep that gets put up a chimney. It can be removed if you want to use the chimney, but a perfect way to stop that draft. Then this one on the right, I'll mention quickly too, is just an evaporative cooler vent cover. A special note about gas and wood space heating. Sometimes if you have older style heaters, then they will be using air from the room to combust, and also potentially putting combustion products back into the room. So that's the only situation in which we don't recommend draft proofing all of those gaps, and that's because we don't want to affect your health, basically. So if this is the case, you would not draft proof a room. However, personally, I think you'd be better off to swap that heater over to something that isn't going to be putting combustion products into the air. You could also put in a carbon monoxide monitor just to make sure you're always being safe. Ceiling insulation. So once you've looked at zoning and drafts, you would next look at ceiling insulation. It has a really big impact in both summer and winter. The current minimum for ceiling insulation, if you're building new, is R4.4, and the R value is just it's a measure of how well that insulation can stop heat transfer through the ceiling. The keys for ceiling insulation are that it's nice and thick and that there are no gaps. And this chart at the top is the one that explains the impact of having gaps in your ceiling insulation. You can see here that if you have just 5% gaps, you are halving the value of your insulation. So even if you have a brand new build house with R4.4 insulation and you have lots of gaps because of downlights or because it just hasn't been laid well, it's actually only functioning at a much lower rate. So if you have an advisor or assessor come to look at your house, that's one of the things they'd be looking at. And they also can help you work out where that is on the priority list. This second chart at the bottom shows the change in heat transfer depending on the amount of insulation you have. So this point here is a house with no ceiling insulation, and you can see there's a lot of heat transfer. But once you get to, say, R3, you've really made a big impact on stopping the heat transfer. So if I looked at a house that already has R3 insulation, even though the minimum for a new build is here, I still wouldn't put that as the first priority for that house. I might say that if they have no wall insulation, that might be a better place to start, because that's then, up here, and they can have a really big impact by adding something there. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing the ceiling, but it just changes the priority order. It is possible to DIY ceiling insulation, but there are a bunch of safety considerations. So you really want to know what you're doing. There's risks of falling, the ladder safety, inhaling dust, getting it in your eyes, electrical safety, and potential asbestos. So this can be done, but make sure that you have investigated properly. Whether you do it yourself or you get someone to install it for you, these are some of the potential challenges and things that you'll have to work out in the ceiling. So this is a good time to just make a quick mention of recessed downlights. One of the most common reasons for gaps in ceiling insulation is the existence of these recessed downlights. You can see on this top left picture. Until recently, these all had to have holes left. That you had to leave a hole in the insulation around every downlight, I think around 20 centimetres on each side. So as you can imagine, that would quite quickly add up to the 5% gaps. Now, there is a way around that, and there's two ways. One is that you can put a downlight cover over that downlight, and that will mean that you can insulate more closely around that. And the other is to swap it over for pretty much the best kind of downlight, which has an IC4 rating. It just means insulation coverage is safe, and that way you can insulate around it and there's not going to be any fire safety issues. Another issue in ceilings is this one. This is just an exhaust fan, and you'll often find that when a tradie installs an exhaust fan, they pull the insulation away from that space, and rather than cutting the insulation to fit it in back around the exhaust fan, which is what you want, they just leave it to the side. You can see this bottom picture just shows a roof space where there's lots of ductwork, maybe evaporative cooling, ducted heating, and it's just hard because there's so many things in there. And the one on the right, the picture at the right as well, is the same. There's just a lot of stuff going on in that roof, so it's going to be harder to do. All right, some more examples of well or poorly done insulation. Remember I said it's got to be nice and thick, so that's that one. This one shows good coverage. This one looks like it was fairly recently installed, that insulation, but I think a tradie has come and installed these bits and pieces and just pulled the insulation away. And that's what you can see on the picture on the right, is that the insulation looks quite new, but it's all been moved to the side and not put back. So this is the sort of thing you can figure out yourself and put back. All right, window improvements would be next on your list of things to focus on. And upgrades to them, windows can be anything from really simple and cheap to very expensive. Why are they important? Well, it's because a single pane glass window has almost no insulating ability. So if you think about how much insulation we're having in our roofs, well, having a window is just this little thin window that heat can pass through fairly easily. Even a double glazed window, to be honest, also has a fairly low, if you convert it to an R value, it's quite low. So the Australian Window Association estimates that up to 40% of a home's heating energy can be lost through windows, and up to 87% of the heat is gained through them. So there's much greater loss and gain through windows than there is through a wall, even an uninsulated wall. But there are luckily lots and lots of things you can do to make them better. And it's a massive frustration of mine that because double glazing is so well marketed, it has the effect that a lot of people think it's the only thing that they can do, where in fact there are a range of things, and it's worth considering all of them and a combination of one or more of a bunch of them. So for windows, I always suggest to people to consider each window in its own light, because windows in different rooms and for different purposes, you can have different upgrades that suit them and suit you the best. The four main things to consider are window coverings and pelmets. I'm sort of lumping them together because they go together. Then there's the glazing, the glass. There's the frames that is holding the glass. And then there's external shading. So the absolute ideal would be that for every window, you have the best possible window coverings, pelmets, double glazing, excellent frames and external shading if needed. But of course, not all of our budgets can do that. So that's where I say, look at each one and work out what you can do that works best for that window and best for you. A quick note on orientation. Orientation is about the position of the house and your windows in relation to the sun and wind. And if you are building new, orientation is really, really important to get right. But the houses that I see, they're already existing. So usually there's nothing you can do about orientation, but what you can do is look at where the house is positioned, oriented, and then work out some ways to mitigate any problems that might cause or enhance any positives that it might offer. So I won't mention any more about orientation now, but we can. I will mention it as we go on, as it's relevant. Now, window coverings and pelmets, I think, are an excellent place to start in an existing home. They can be quite a cheap place if you are on a budget and you just need to do something to fix up your windows. I do want to show you a couple of things on this chart here. So the first one is, well, first of all, the chart is showing the comparison of winter heat losses through windows and comparing different kinds of window coverings. So this one you can see is a bare single glazed window. That means a single glazed window with no window covering at all. Then here you have a bare double glazed window. Just under it, you have a single glazed window with heavy lined curtains and a pelmet. So you can see that a single glazed window with a heavy line drape and a pelmet is actually marginally better at stopping heat transfer than a double glazed window with no window covering. So I guess I like to show people that, just to show them that double glazing is fantastic, and if you can afford it, definitely do it. But if you can't afford it, there are other options. You can often get heavy lined curtains from secondhand shops because they're not in fashion, and you can get really good quality ones, and you can make your own DIY pelmets. So that could be a good option. It's also a good option for a renter who is obviously not going to go and upgrade all the windows to double glazing, but you can put in your own window coverings. Window coverings are particularly good at stopping heat loss through windows in winter. They do help in summer a little bit, but mainly it's for winter. And here are some examples of thermally efficient window coverings. This one here is just a heavy line drape, and it actually does have an invisible pelmet on it, which I'll show you now. I was going to say I'll show you later, but I'll show you now. This picture at the top here shows what's called an invisible pelmet. And really it's a pelmet without the front and sides of the box. So most people will think of a pelmet as a box pelmet, but an invisible one also does a really good job. This one is a DIY kit you can buy from a business called EcoMaster that have a lot of different draft proofing products. And the one below it, this one, is a very cheap, simple one that you can make yourself by cutting it's some sort of builder's plastic or something and just basically putting it at the top of the curtain. The most thermally efficient covering is going to be a heavy lined curtain with a pelmet, but other options, whoops, change the screen again. Another option is this one, which is if you have deep window frames or reveals, you can install a honeycomb or sometimes even a Holland blind inside that, and that also stops air flowing. The key with a good window covering is to stop air flowing across the window because that's how the heat is transferred. Next, after the coverings and pelmets, you would be looking at glazing, and there are many different ways you can upgrade glazing. I suppose the simplest and most well-known one is to simply take out your single glazed windows and buy double glazed windows with new frames and put them in. It's going to be roughly a cost of $850 a square metre, so it is a big cost if you're doing a whole house. There are some other options. One is that you can sometimes find second-hand units to go into the same space as your existing window, and the second-hand units are often not used as such. They've been over-ordered for a building job or something, and they're just trying to basically get rid of them. You have to make sure it's the right size. That's the key. Otherwise, your builder or whoever puts it in is going to curse you as they try and get it to fit properly. The other option, if you have good timber frames, which a lot of older houses do, is to replace just the glass. If you do this, there's a business in Melbourne that does this, and it's about $275 a square metre. That doesn't include the installation, but if you are a handy person, you may be able to install it yourself. The next kind of option you have for windows is something called secondary glazing. And this means that your existing window stays where it is, the window and frame, and you bring a second pane and bring it on, and that's called the secondary glaze. Often that second pane is made of clear acrylic, not glass, mainly because it's just going to be easier to work with. You can cut it to size, it's not going to break. There are several professional secondary glazing companies that I've listed up here. Some of them work only with timber windows. Some of them will work with any kind of windows, including old steel frames and aluminium frames. To get it professionally done is going to be around $450 a metre square, I believe, at an average. You can technically do your own secondary glazing, but you do need some skills to be able to do that. And the way you do it is buy a sheet of clear acrylic and cut it to size and attach it with timber beading. And then finally, there are some cheap or temporary options that are perfect for renters or perfect for, say, you've just moved in somewhere and you're desperate for an improvement and you just haven't got sorted to do anything more long term. You can buy a film that you attach to the window frame that creates a still airspace, and that gives an insulative effect. Or there are different ways you can make DIY secondary glazing just with simple fly screen frames, or you can even stick bubble wrap up on a window, and that actually makes a big difference. Doesn't necessarily look really nice, but it's going to help you stay more warm. And here are some pictures of these things. So we have the double glazing here on the left. This one here is professional secondary glazing, which you can see it looks really nice. You wouldn't know that it's, not a double glazing. Then we have someone here attaching their own clear acrylic secondary glazed panel. So it comes like this with this paper stuck to it, and you pull that off. Down here you have the clear comfort film that's attached to the frame. And again, you can see how it leaves a little space. And here's somebody installing some bubble wrap on their windows as a temporary option. Frames are really important, and they too often get forgotten, but I'd like to explain a couple of things. So the first thing is have a look at these blue arrows. Hang on, where are we? Here. This is a single glazed window with an aluminium frame, and this is a single glazed window with a timber or a UPVC, which is plastic frame. So you can see that the frame has a big impact on the thermal efficiency of that window. Now here's a double glazed window with an aluminium frame and a double glazed window with a timber or UPVC frame. So you can see that this is by far the most efficient. And the other thing that I want to point out is that if you have single glazed timber framed windows, you're not going to get a massive benefit from upgrading to double glazed aluminium framed windows, which is most commonly what is sold for double glazing. So just keep that in mind. And if you have the single glazed timber framed, perhaps it might be a better option to try and upgrade just the glass. All right, and the last thing is shading. External shading is the absolute key when it comes to stopping summer heat gain. Every metre square of direct sun that comes onto your glass is like having a bar radiator on in the room. And so the best way you can stop that is by simply shading your windows. It can be any sort of physical cover. It doesn't really matter what it is. You just need to stop the sun hitting the window. One of my favourites is this one here, the deciduous vine. So it grows thick and lush in summer, and you get a green canopy that shelters you. And then in winter, all of the leaves fall off and the winter sun can come straight in, which is great. The best shading for east and west windows is vertical shading, because that's when morning and afternoon is when the sun is at quite an angle. And for north, it's horizontal shading. User behaviour is really important when it comes to shading, because you can have great blinds, but if you don't put them down at the beginning of a hot day, they're not really going to do much good. So you need to be active when it comes to external shading. Okay, next, after all of those things, you would be looking at wall and underfloor insulation. And it really depends on the house which one you would do first. So for walls, these are a couple of pictures showing how, hang on, I'll try and circle them. This is showing wall insulation being pumped into a weatherboard home just through little holes in the weatherboard. So they pump it in and they fill up the gaps. And this is being pumped into a brick veneer or a double brick home. So again, they create little holes and pump it in, and sometimes can put a bit up through the tiles if you have a tile roof. These pictures at the bottom show underfloor insulation after it's installed. Now, why would you choose one or the other? Well, for example, our house in Hurstbridge is on a hill, it's on stilts, and there's quite a lot of airflow under the house. And we only had floorboards, no carpet or anything. So for us, underfloor insulation was quite a high priority. Whereas if you have a house that is, got a bricked in enclosed underfloor area, there's really not that much airflow, and you've got floating floorboards or carpet throughout almost all the house, I wouldn't even probably bother, because those things are all stopping the airflow and stopping heat transfer. So again, if you get an assessor or an advisor to come and look at your house, this is the kind of thing they can help you work out what is most appropriate for your house, because each one is so different. So onto the key energy using appliances. I'm only going to look at the top ones, the top energy using ones, which is heating and cooling, hot water systems mainly, and then everything else I'll give a very quick mention of star ratings for other appliances. But heating and cooling and hot water are really the key ones that account for a lot of your energy use. Lighting used to be more of an energy user, but these days with everything being switched over to LEDs, they're so efficient that lighting is no longer a big drain. All right, so for heating, the reason we started this whole presentation with the building shell is because by improving your building shell, you are significantly reducing how much heating or cooling you need to do. So, and remember, an energy efficient home is just going to be more naturally comfortable, and you won't have to use the same amount of active heating or cooling, which is going to save you money. The most common form of heating in Victoria is gas ducted. This one here at the top. Gas ducted heating, not zoned. That's, I reckon, 80% of houses I go to have gas ducted heating. But the most efficient, energy efficient way to heat is actually reverse cycle air conditioning. You can see that's the case either in a room or for a whole house. A lot of people have memories of when reverse cycle air conditioning was actually quite expensive to run, and that has held on. It used to be that people only installed them for cooling and they would rack up a bill trying to keep their house cool. But things have changed a lot. The technology of reverse cycle air conditioning has improved out of sight, and they are so much more efficient now. And as heaters, they are the most efficient way to heat by a long shot. There's nothing else that comes even close. So generally, that would always be my recommendation for heating and cooling. There are some other things you can do as well, but to have it in a nutshell, that's the most efficient thing to do. And there are some excellent government rebates to help people do that, especially low-income houses. There's a new one that's for people on a combined income of less than $90,000, where they pay you $1,000 towards the cost, plus some extra if you need to cap off a gas system and things like that. Once you have your heating sorted, how do you make it as energy efficient as possible? So basically, this is what you can do, even if you don't change your heating. What do you do to make it work best? Now, the simplest couple to begin with are to dress for the season and set the thermostat. So one of the ways we waste energy is by putting our thermostats too high in winter and too low in summer. The ideal temperature to set your thermostat in winter is between 18 and 20 degrees. So basically, you'll still need to put a jumper on, but that's okay, it's winter. I'm not saying you should be uncomfortable. I definitely don't want anyone being uncomfortable, but you do also have to, acknowledge that it is actually winter, and so that's how you behave. I'm thinking teenagers here who want to put the heater up really high and walk around in a t-shirt in winter. I can't do that. Of course, another way is to heat by zone rather than the whole house, and that's why individual reverse cycle air conditioners are also a really good option, because you can just keep one area comfortable without heating a huge area. It's really important also to keep everything that you're using serviced and working well. Now, this picture here of the ductwork was actually a house that I assessed, and the homeowner had literally that week had a brand new ducted, high efficiency ducted gas heater put in. And she said to the installers, can you check the ductwork, because I you know, I want to make sure it's working well and, you know, replace it if it's not. And they said, oh, no, it's fine. If it's not blowing cold air, you'll be fine. But she said, oh, to me, can you just have a look? So I looked under the house. I didn't even need to do anything. I just opened the hatch. And this is what I could see was this terribly torn up ductwork. Now, that is old. It's leaky. It's probably losing 50% of the heat that's being generated just through that ductwork. So it's really critically important to make sure that the unit is working well, but also if you have a ducted system, to make sure the ducts are in good condition and repaired if they're not. Down here, you can see a reverse cycle air conditioner with quite a dirty filter. It's surprising how many people aren't aware that they have filters, but you need to take them out every now and then. It's very easy. You just open up the flap at the front and take the filter out and give it a wash with soapy warm water and put it back. One other thing that is a great way to keep warm that a lot of people don't know about is what's called a personal heating device. What you will have heard of is a hot water bottle, but there are modern versions of this. And one of them is this, you can see that chair, that is actually my office chair, and that is my heated seat pad that I sit on while I'm working in winter. And often that is enough to stop me having to put the heater on, because just sitting there on that warm pad is enough. And you can get heated throws and, you know, heated blankets, heated vests, all sorts of things, which are brilliant. All right, cooling. The cheapest way to cool yourself is a ceiling fan or a portable, like a pedestal fan. Now, of course, they're not actually cooling the air. They're just making you feel cooler. Like a draft would make you feel cooler in winter in a bad way. A fan makes you feel cooler in summer in a good way. The next most efficient technically is an evaporative cooler. They're the ones that use water to humidify the air, and that then the water and the air movement makes you feel cooler. But the problem with those is that as the temperature changes, becomes more extreme and there's more humidity, they tend to work less well. They don't work with humidity or over about 30 degrees. So the experience of what I've seen in houses is generally that some people are happy with just evaporative cooling if the heat doesn't bother them too much, but a lot of people will end up getting reverse cycle air conditioning as well to manage those really hot days. So if you consider that reverse cycle air conditioning is the cheapest way and easiest way to heat, then for cooling, to me, it makes sense. If you get them, you've got both. So reverse cycle air conditioning and ceiling fans is a really good combination. And of course, anything that you do to improve your building shell is going to reduce how much you need, because your house will stay cooler. What's next? How to make your cooling as energy efficient as possible. A lot of these are just the same as for heating: setting the thermostat, dress for the season, cool by zone, and make everything serviced, and clean filters. Use the ceiling fans before you use any active cooling, and this is where ventilation comes in, just to make sure you are allowing air, the cool, at the end of a hot day when the cool breeze comes, helping it move through the house. And one way you can do that is by opening a small window in the direction of where the cooling breeze is coming, and then a larger one on the other side of the house. And this creates a bit of a suction where it just pulls the cool air through the house. When you have a 2-story house, it can sometimes be a good idea to, if you can't get the airflow, get it going up the stairwell, you can add an openable skylight, which has that effect of pulling the cool air up and all the hot air from the house out of the house. Hot water systems. You may remember from the earlier chart, this is also another large cost. The most common sorts of hot water systems that I see in Victoria are gas storage systems. Just like with heating, there are good rebates to move people away from old and inefficient electric and gas storage systems. The most energy efficient, cheapest to run is going to be a solar system with a gas boost. However, if you are on the page of trying to move away from gas, then a heat pump is a very good option, and it's also extremely efficient to run. So although it's technically not as efficient as the solar with gas boost, you can use your renewable energy for it, and it's still extremely efficient. So the hub has got heat pump bulk buy programs, so is my local renewable energy group, and it's happening in different councils as well. They're the same technology as reverse cycle air conditioning, but for hot water. So the same improvements in technology that have happened have gone across those two fields of products. Now, if you do have solar energy on your roof, then you'll be able to time the heat pump to boost when you're in peak generation mode. So from about 11 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. And that's a really big bonus too. Making it as efficient as possible. So again, even if you don't change what you have, there are lots of things you can do. One is to make sure your shower flow is not too high. The optimal is a well 3-star rated shower head, which is the standard that you get in the hardware store, uses between 7 and 9 litres a minute. You can lag the pipes. This black stuff that you can see on the pipes, that's called lagging. It just means insulation. And a lot of older systems don't have any or have it very bad. What it's doing is holding the heat into the hot water on its way from the hot water system to where it's coming out in the house. You can also check if you have a storage tank with water that it's not heating too high. If you've got an electric system, then you need an electrician to check that. If it's gas, you can modify it yourself. Basically, it has to be at 70 degrees for safety, for killing bugs and things, but if it's higher than that, you may be overheating it unnecessarily. Another couple of things you can do is to make sure your washing machine is connected to the hot water system, because it's going to be more efficient generally at generating hot water than if your washing machine does it itself. If it does it, it's going to be like boiling a kettle inside the hot water, the washing machine. And if you have those mixer taps, just get in the habit of leaving them on the cold side, so that if someone pushes the tap up just to get a little bit of cold water, it doesn't start drawing that hot water unnecessarily. With other appliances, all of these main ones, fridges, TVs, computers, washing machines, dishwashers, they all have now star ratings. So anything that's new will have an Energy Star rating. And the purpose of that is to help you compare like for like. That's the most important aspect that you have to remember. So if you're looking for a fridge, the first thing you do is work out how big a fridge you need, and you'll go for the smallest one that you need and can keep stocked up. But then say if you want a 300 litre fridge, then different star ratings of 300 litre fridges will show you which is the most energy efficient. If you're looking at a 600 litre fridge that's 3-star and a 300 litre fridge that's 3-star, those star ratings are not comparable because it only compares the same product, so the 300 litre. Hopefully I'm explaining that well. So basically, anytime you're replacing one of these appliances, just choose the highest star rating you can, because that will help you save energy over time. Solar panels. So far we've talked about the appliances that use energy, but this is obviously one that can help you generate it. Solar PV or panels, solar electricity on the roof, it is nowadays very affordable with a typically fast payback period, usually between 3 and 5 years. And it's suitable if you have north, east or west facing, or a combination of those things. If you have that roof space that's mostly shade free. The modern systems can handle a little bit of shade. So there's a lot of capacity to put solar onto your roofs. And again, the hub will be doing a bulk buy for that, I believe. There is still a Solar Vic government rebate if you're installing, which I think is around $1,400 now. I know that a lot of people that I go to see they say, yes, I want solar, but I just don't know who to go to because I've heard so many stories and I just don't know who to trust. Now, the excellent news is that because this was such a common issue, a while back, the Clean Energy Council, that's the accrediting body for solar retailers, was asked to put in a second level of I suppose an accreditation almost, to help people decide who was going to be reputable. So any solar retailer has to be approved. Sorry, any solar retailer has to be accredited by the Clean Energy Council, but that's just sort of like getting a license to be a plumber. So you can have a plumber's license but still not be a very good plumber, or you can be a brilliant plumber. So what happened is they said, okay, we're going to put in this approved solar retailer scheme, and it's voluntary, but solar retailers can apply to become approved, and to do that they have to show that they have never been taken to court or VCAT for any of their work in their current business or any previous business they've been in. They have to show that they have very good quality components and all of their equipment, that they are good at installing, that they have good customer service, that they have good warranties and people lined up, should their business go out of business, that there are people lined up to take on the warranties so that their customers aren't left in the lurch. So that sort of thing, they have to show all of that. And this means that my advice for people is, if you choose an approved solar retailer from that, they've got a link you can click to say choose and find an approved solar retailer. As long as you do that, your risk of having problems down the track is much, much, much less. So I think of around 3,000 accredited solar retailers, there's around 100 that are approved. And you can see from 3,000, you've got about 100 to choose from. All right, what's next? This is actually a picture from my own house. We have solar power, but quite a small system. And we also have quite a bit of loss from shade. We knew that when we put it in. But it shows, let me show you, try and explain it here. The blue and green section, so this is over 7 days. The blue and green section shows the peak solar generation window, and the blue bit is where we're using the energy. The green is what's being exported to the grid. And then this red bit is when we're no longer generating energy, but we're pulling it back from the grid. So the best way to use your solar energy is to shift as much of this stuff that's in the red into this bit, so that you're using almost, well, ideally all of the self-generated energy and reducing this red part that you're buying back from the grid. But any of those approved solar retailers should be supplying their customers with something like this. It's usually an online portal that you can log into. I know that the one we have actually shows this for each individual panel, so that we can over years see, okay, this panel's actually just too shaded now, we should move it. But there's a lot of information you can get from that and tweak your system to make it work better. Thank you so much for joining us and joining me. Before I go, I want to speak to 3 of the things that the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub will be making available to people in the catchment area. And the first is the training that's going to be offered to volunteers for the Home Energy Advisory Service. Jeff already mentioned that, and I think he may be mentioning it again in a minute. But if any of you are interested in and learning more about this, I'll be the teacher for that, and we'll be looking at all of the things that we've spoken of in these slides. To me, it's an incredibly interesting field, and also really rewarding to be able to help people learn more about their houses and how to be more comfortable. For this kind of work, there are 2 main skills. One is technical understanding, which I'm sure is obvious, but the other one is that you really need to be able to engage with the householders and listen to them and understand what their needs are. They might have different budgets or motivations, and how long they're going to be there. If they're going to be there for 2 years or 20 years, then your advice might be very different. So it's actually not, to be a good energy advisor or energy assessor, you need both of those things in equal measure. And so we'll be spending time on both of those things. Part of the course is learning the technical stuff. but another part of it will be going on some site visits and just, having a go at figuring out how to match up potential upgrades with the person that's at that house. You definitely don't need to be a technical guru, but you do just have to have a good understanding of how houses work. The second thing I'd like to speak about is that if you are not interested in training, but you would like to get some better information about your home, there are two ways you can do that. And one is, of course, to sign up for getting a free volunteer advisor to come to your house. That will be available after the training next year, which I think will be April or May, something like that. And those advisors will be looking at the same sorts of things that we've looked at in this presentation. Then there is the option of a paid assessor, a professional assessor coming to your house. That would be mostly myself, or if there's too much work, then a colleague of mine. And you may choose that just for the high level of experience and expertise, or you may choose it because you actually want to get a scorecard certificate. That's the software that I use. The scorecard certificate gives you a star rating which shows the cost to run your house, and it allows you to have a real tangible baseline against which you can make upgrades and improve the star rating of your house. It's also something that is required to get some financial incentives. For example, the Bank Australia have a clean energy home loan, but you need to show that you've got a 1-star increase in your scorecard rating. So things like that. Either way, I hope that people will take up these options and get excited about their homes and the things they can do that might be very cheap and low cost and DIY, or bigger picture upgrades. All of these, the details for both of these things will be on the Hub website, along with the pricing for the paid option and how to register for the training, all of that sort of stuff. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is that the Hub are working with a group called Home Lab to offer energy efficiency upgrades to people through the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. So it's called the VEU scheme. It's been going for a long time, and if you've ever had someone come and swap over light globes at your place, that's what it is. However, rather than waiting for people to get door knocked or cold called, personally, I don't like either of those things. So what we're doing instead is working with a business called Home Lab that I know personally, and they can do all these upgrades, but it will mean that there's a specific group that's coming to you. They're not going to be cold calling you or, landing up on your door without you asking them. It would actually be a booking system. All of the information about the different upgrades will be on the Hub website. They do a bunch of things under the free scheme, and there's also a few other things that they can offer at an additional cost. The reason they're offering those is because they're good for energy efficiency, but just aren't covered by the VEU scheme. And Home Lab will be paying the Hub a small fee per installation, so that will be passed on to the closest renewable energy group, which will be excellent for those groups too. If you happen to end up choosing to have a volunteer or a professional advisor come to your home, they can also help you work out which VEU upgrades might be suitable to you. We're going to have a quick look now at some of the pictures explaining what they are. If you have any incandescent, compact fluoro or reflector globes, so this is all the standard light globes, the bayonet or screw-in fitting, they can all be changed free of charge to LED globes. If you have any recessed downlights, there are a range of options of what you can do depending on what you have. It's a little bit more complicated. If you have the old halogen downlights and they haven't been changed over yet, then you can get them swapped over free, either just the globe or the whole unit swapped over, and that would definitely be what I would suggest, is you get the whole unit swapped over, because it will solve not just the energy issue, but also you won't have to have a hole in the insulation, and there will be no drafts either. So, and it's free, so why not? If you have other kinds of recessed downlights. So if they've already had the globes swapped, or if they're compact fluoro globes, then, or if they have dimmers on them, this is a little bit more complicated. You can get them swapped over, but you might need to ring HomeLab and work out which things are going to suit you. And the final page shows all of the other sort of random things that can be done. Up to 2 external doors can be draft proofed per home, free. And that includes a door to a garage, or a door, an internal door, to a toilet or bathroom with an open louver window. So I don't know if you remember the picture of the glass slats. They're not around in modern homes, but if you've got a 70s home, you might well have something like that. So that's included as an external door. If anyone has unsealed exhaust fans, the ones I showed you is just a hole in the ceiling, then HomeLab can install these draft stoppers over the top, and that stops them being a draft. You can have as many free in your home as you have unsealed exhaust fans. Shower heads, if your shower has a flow rate of higher than 9 litres per minute, you can have a free swap, up to 3 per household. And a new one that's been added to the VEU scheme recently is the in-home energy displays, which you may have been getting calls about and flyers in the letterbox. Basically, they will organise an electrician to come and install this device on your meter box, and then they link it up to your smartphone, and there's an app, and you can see what energy is being used in your house. So that's a really useful thing if you're trying to, learn better how your house works. And then just a couple more things. The wall vent covers, they are available. Personally, I think you're much better off just filling it with plaster, because the wall vent covers can sometimes fall off and you're never going to need them again. So just fill them up. With hot water systems, the lagging that I mentioned, HomeLab can do that for you at $15 a metre, which can be a great option. You can buy it yourself and do it, but so easy to get someone else to do it. And at the same time, they can do this thing called a valve cozy, which is also for a hot water system. Thank you again. It's been lots and lots of information, but I hope that you're inspired by some of the things you can do to your houses, and that you might like to join the training. Thank you very much.